Welcome to the Queen City of Cincinnati, Ohio. This is where we find ourselves for Stadium Review episode number 32. As we're on the north banks of the Ohio River, checking out Paycor Stadium, the jungle, the home of the Cincinnati Bengals, which is brought to you in partnership with Pull Tab Sports. Check out some of their content on Midwest sports and culture, as well as some bonus articles from me about stadium trips that I've been on at pulltabsports.com. Paycor originally opened up in 2000 as Paul Brown Stadium, as Paycor has just recently taken over the naming rights in 2022. As a Browns fan growing up, I was always really confused as why the Brown Stadium wasn't named Paul Brown Stadium, but instead the Bengals Stadium had the word Brown in it. Paul Brown was a Northern Ohio native, and in 1946 he co-founded the Cleveland Browns. But then in 1968, Paul Brown moved south and was one of the original founders of the Cincinnati Bengals, who played their first two seasons at Nippert Stadium, which is the home of the Cincinnati Bearcats football team. From 1970 to 1999, the Bengals played in Riverfront Stadium, which was also shared with the Cincinnati Reds baseball team. It was one of those large circular Coliseum dual-use stadiums that were super popular in the 1970s. Like so many of those other dual-use stadiums, the NFL team moved out first, which left the Reds as the lone tenant in the building for the next 2 years. The stadium's nicknamed the Jungle, playing at the fact that Bengal tigers' natural habitat is a jungle. And the stadium design tried to evoke some of that with the green seats throughout the entire stadium. And I think some of those jungle elements are also kind of displayed in the stadium itself, with weird, jagged, chaotic spots that don't necessarily make much sense, as nothing seems to be symmetrical or even throughout the stadium. And the team also loves to make you hear the jungle, as they love playing Guns N' Roses' Welcome to the Jungle, as a capacity crowd of 65,515 are going crazy for it. We got down to the stadium nice and early, and it was kind of upsetting because we were the only ones there initially. However, it meant I was first in line to get some free potatoes. So I took some time to walk to the stadium when no one else was there and look at the exterior of the venue. And as we walked toward the stadium, I was absolutely shocked at the lack of tailgaters. It's just before 10 a.m. and these immediate parking lots next to the stadium are completely empty. I'm gonna go out and say that's pretty pathetic. However, the main block party tailgate started at 10 a.m. for the 1 p.m. kickoff time. So I guess most of the tailgaters don't really start till 10 a.m. either. And I do think that's pretty weak. The outside of the stadium gives you a real nice swooping stadium overview, as the arc of the upper tier of seats gives the stadium a real nice arcing silhouette to it. As we made our way around the north side of the stadium, we actually saw the Cleveland Browns bus roll in. And it was super cool because I was able to see some of the Browns media staff getting off the bus going into the stadium. And I really enjoyed this shot here of this entranceway off to the west side of the stadium. Off to the south side, there is some greenery, and also you can see the Bengals team offices. Now the Bengals are one of the few NFL teams to have their practice facility right next to their main stadium. And they actually did have a bubble over one of the fields. I know that people always complain that the Bengals don't put enough money into their practice facilities, but we didn't make our way west towards the practice fields because it was time to do some partying. Freedom Way runs west to east from the Bengals Stadium to the Reds' Great American Ballpark, as this area is commonly referred to as the Banks, and they shut down all the streets around this to make it a huge block party called Pregame at the Banks. This area has a lot of bars and restaurants that you can eat at before the game, and there's a lot of street vendors selling drinks, food, as well as live music, as it's one big party atmosphere, and it was really cool to see so many groups of mixed fans, both Browns and Bengals fans together. Growing up a Browns fan in Southwest Ohio, I have a lot of negative views of Bengals fans. So I tried to go into the day with an open mindset, because I like for my stadium reviews to be as non-biased as possible. And from the pregame party, this was definitely what you'd want to see as a visiting fan, as the Bengals fans were very welcome, and maybe a little too much towards my mom, who was having a very fun time. And after this quick dance session, it was time to head into the stadium. However, as we made our way outside of the kind of party area, for whatever reason, the vibes around the stadium felt a lot more dark and ominous. I don't know if that's because we're in the foreboding large shadow of the stadium, or just the intensity of the rivalry really started to boil up as everyone's elbow to elbow trying to cram their way into the stadium, but something just felt different. However, it seems my mom didn't get that same feeling.
Here we go, Brownie.
Now, I've always had an extremely negative view of Paul Brown Stadium because of the main lower level concourse. And that kind of remains to ring true as this visit, as the sideline concourses are so deep, dark, and cramped. And if you have lower bowl seats between the 10-yard lines on the sidelines, you have to go down to this lower concourse. And to me, this seems like an absolute dungeon. It's just one big concrete cave. And I remember in a past visit when I was there, it was kind of a chilly day outside, not too bad, but I remember going on the concourse and the temperature immediately dropped about 10 to 20 degrees. However, we were seated in the upper section. We were on the east side of the stadium where the visitor sideline was, and to get to that east side upper concourse, you can take the very famous and awkward escalator that kind of sticks out of the stadium. And before the game, that escalator was absolutely packed with fans going up there. So we decided to take the steps up instead.
Like the steps?
I love the steps.
I can tell.
However, that did let us get a sneak peek at a little bit of that middle section club level concourse. At halftime of the game, we actually went back downstairs and I was able to check out the south end concourse. And in the corner of the south end zone, they have this stage there that they do some pregame festivities on and also some other entertainment during the halftime. And it's all decorated out with these fake vines and plants to make it look like a jungle. And that's where we saw this interestingly dressed human. And I really like the aesthetic here, as on one side you have the stands and the other side you have the Bengals corporate offices. But it has a very clean design, especially it's all white and looks extremely modern, which I really liked. And a big plus from the sideline concourses is it's not dark and dingy. The openness is absolutely fantastic here. After halftime, we did get the chance to take up that escalator I was talking about, and it's a pretty cool view of both the stadium and the Ohio River to the south. However, its positioning is still super weird to me, and the upper concourse is completely different than the lower level concourse. I really loved how wide open the upper level is, as it gives you a great view of the city, and you can see the huge stream of people trying to get in those night gates coming from the party at the banks. But I thought this view that it gave us was absolutely beautiful, and I did not expect that, especially with the comparison with the lower level concourse. So while on the concourse, you know we have to grab some food. But I did get some free food at one point, because someone actually dropped this mini bag of pretzels on the landing next to my seat. And hey, free food is free food, you know I'm scooping that up and eating that. But I did buy a hot dog later in the game. It was a pretty decent dog, nothing to write home about, but also nothing to really complain about at the same time. Let's head off the concourse and into the main seating bowl. Some of the main points that I really liked about the stadium is how you felt really close to the action even in the upper sections.
Let's get some shots of this stadium, let's go.
And I was a big fan of the roof that goes over about half of the upper bowl along the sidelines. Not only is it great because the weather can be kind of crap sometimes, but also it provides a really nice arcing silhouette. However, there are quite a few things that I didn't really like about the stadium layout. For starters, it seemed like the designers of the stadium made everything asymmetrical on purpose. In full disclosure here, I am very OCD, and I'm not saying it as a joke, I'm actually diagnosed as OCD, and so kind of the unevenness of the stadium just really bothers me and irks me, especially because there's no particular reason for it to be like this. While that west end middle tier suite level isn't centered properly and symmetrical, the east side underneath us actually was, which is good. But as for the sections behind the end zones, I do not understand why they're like this. They just seem so strange, and they're cut off at slants for no particular good reason. And they have always irked me, and yes, they continue to irk me to this day, if you can't tell. And the weirdest part about it is the south end zone. While the gap for a walkway to the seats goes all the way up the stand, why don't you just fill this in with seats so it looks normal? There's no need for this. Maybe it's kind of like a Bengal tiger scratch or something to the seats. I don't know. Regardless, I'm not a fan of it. The entrances to the upper levels are really interesting, as stadiums will typically have just one opening with stairs going up and down like they have here at the club level. But for the upper sections, there's a break in the seating about a third of the way up, as there's about one entrance walkway for about every 2 sections. It's weird because it really breaks up the crowd between the lower and upper sections. So if you have a packed house, you don't have just one big sea of people, which I think is kind of unfortunate, but logistically it worked out super well for us as we were in the top row of that lower third with the wall at our backs, so we could stand the whole game. And if you know me, you know I stood the entire game.
I can stand the whole game if I want. It's fantastic.
But those stairs there kind of create an issue because you can't really see the whole field of play because they kind of block off something.
But this wall block is saying, it's not bad.
Another thing that I really liked about the stadium layout is that both the ends behind the end zones are kind of open. The north end kind of lets you look to the highway, but I'm sure if you're on the other side of the stadium, you can see into downtown Cincinnati south. And from where we were, we could see south to the Ohio River, and we also saw a train crossing the railroad tracks over the river, which was pretty cool. For the field itself, I was pretty bummed out when the Bengals went to the striped B logo at the 50-yard line instead of the leaping cat. That cat looks sweet. And also the stadium walls that separated the playing surface from the field used to have tall blades of grass to make it look like you were actually in the jungle. And that's a downgrade for me. Getting ready for game time, you know I'm dressed all Browns head to toe.
Here we go, Brownies. Here we go.
And the atmosphere in the stadium really started to build nicely. The fans were electric right out of the gate with the Browns' first possession, as when the Bengals are on defense, the fans really let the opponents hear it. And every time the Bengals score, they actually have this song that they play. And to be honest, I think this is a banger. I absolutely love this. But they'd ruin it by following up with the Who Dey chant.
What the f does that even mean?
And I think the Who Dey chant's pretty stupid, not gonna lie. Obviously I'm very biased, but I don't like it. For the game itself, there wasn't a whole lot exciting from the Browns offense. But they finally got a touchdown in the third quarter.
Yeah, Chief! Go on and Joku! Yeah, he's in! Yeah!
And everything after that was just pretty dismal. As the Bengals took the game with the final score of 23-10. And I will say that Bengals fans were extremely nice and respectful until about midway in the fourth quarter, when it became apparent that the Bengals were going to win the game. And at that point, things turned extremely nasty for no good reason at all. As I heard a lot of comments and insults thrown at Browns fans that definitely crossed lines. And I know everyone's like, well, every fan base has some bad eggs in it. No, this is a lot more than just a few bad eggs, as it seemed about 30 to 40% of the people there were belligerently drunk, and several people put hands on me, and it was a very ugly scene there at the end of the game. I do have a friend whose dad was a season ticket holder for 20 years, but he finally gave up his season tickets because he hated the fans there. I remember him saying how it's just a bunch of drunk people yelling "Who Dey" the whole time. And some of the things that I heard and the unprovoked slurs that I received were absolutely disgraceful. And I've been to a lot of stadiums, and a lot of the times as a visiting fan, and I've never gotten anything like this. And because of that, I will never return to Paycor Stadium and never give a cent of my money to the Bengals organization ever again. Now, I clearly had a very fun time, and I don't want this end to tarnish the reputation of the stadium as a whole, but if you're a visiting fan, I do not recommend hanging out at Paycor Stadium, because the Bengals fans do not seem to know how to win. Anyways, that's it for this video. Sorry to finish it on a little bit of a rant. I know Bengals fans probably aren't going to be the happiest with me about that, but I say things as I see them, and I'm not going to sugarcoat the experience at all. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time for another stadium review. Thanks!